I'm Johnny Detroit. With me is the totals man himself, Greg Shake and Baker. Greg, how are you doing today, sir?
I am a little bit under the weather, but I'm okay.
Quit being a whiny little bitch. Let's continue. We got 30
Got some
minutes to
money.
break down as much as possible, and it's my pleasure to have Greg. We had Ken Thompson on yesterday. We're going to have Joe Gavazzi on tomorrow. Last week we had Dave Essler, and to me, each of them bring something special to the table. But one thing that Greg brings to the table that I don't think anyone at pregame, and in my opinion, almost anyone in the industry outside of, clearly Raz, when it comes to totals, you are a totals expert. It's what you've done to make yourself successful at pregame and to gain a following. So I appreciate you coming on to talk basketball. Greg sent me a bunch of talking points of things he wants to go over. We'll try our best to get any questions in. You could use the pop-up module to submit those. And like I said, I'll try my best to get those in, but I want Greg to cover as much as he can in the next 30 minutes. We're going to close with a coupon, which will give you half off Greg's basketball package for opening day of college basketball. So without further ado, let's get right to those talking points. The first one, Greg, is the new hand check rules for college basketball and how you think it will affect scoring. Go ahead. It's on you,
Okay.
sir.
We already covered this a little bit in a forum thread, but obviously there's no doubt that the new hand check rules are going to make for more scoring. Um, Teams are going to have to either play more zone or they're going to have to sag a little bit on the man-to-man, and that's just going to make for more better opportunities to the hoop, or it's going to make for more fouls. Now, the interesting thing is that, and I saw this on another blog, in 2009, there were 91 BCS schools that hit 70% or more of their free throws. Last year, just 34 teams hit 70% of free throws. So I'm not sure that more fouls is going to actually cause that much more scoring. So I do think that the most important thing that you can do, and of course this is always important anyway, is to watch as much college basketball as you can in the first week and see how these coaches are going to do this. Some are going to probably play a little bit more zone. Some are going to be totally stubborn and do what they do and continue to play a lot of man-to-man. And if they do that, there's more than likely going to be a lot of scoring, or certainly more scoring in those games where the coaches are going to stick to the man-to-man. Now, again, I've seen different things from different coaches. I've heard different comments on how they're going to attack this new rule. And I've also seen some exhibition games. And generally, there have been anywhere between 10 to 15 to 20 more free throws in those early exhibition games. So if that is a trend, then that's something to look forward to. Whether or not sports books will adjust to that early, I don't know. Of
Well,
course,
that was one thing me and Ken talked about yesterday. One of the things I brought up, and I love the point you just made about, people automatically assume more free throws stops the clock, more scoring. But we've all watched college basketball. A lot of these guys couldn't hit a free throw if the hoop was 3 times as big. So that's a great point. Is maybe research the teams that historically are the players that aren't as efficient on hitting those free throws. But one thing I brought up to Ken is people say more fouls, more scoring because of the free throws. I didn't even think what you just said, but one of the things I brought up to Ken was that's assuming that take away the free throws. If your stud players are sitting on the bench because they're getting fouled early because of these new rules, what if these shitball players? There's a reason the guy who has to come in when the starter gets a quick couple fouls because of these new rules and he's not used to playing this way his whole basketball career. The guy coming off the bench is coming off the bench for a reason. So I mentioned this to Ken, and your point, to me, even backs up my belief even more, is everyone's saying more scoring, more scoring, more scoring. More fouls doesn't nearly mean more scoring if they can't hit their free throws. And more fouls also means there's a chance those better players that can score are going to be sitting on the bench more, which takes us to our
that is
next
correct.
point. And at any point you want to like explain more in detail how you're going to use this or how they should use this, meaning the customers or the people listening or watching this, for totals, is the pace, offense efficiency, defensive efficiency. What do you mean by that? What should people be looking for?
Well, it's pretty common, I guess, terms if you handicap a lot of totals. I want to make a point first before we go into that, though, that, as you know, books are frightened with college basketball totals, so we don't actually know when we're going to be seeing a lot of those coming out. That's actually going to give us a chance to learn the teams. So
Right.
We might have some TV totals this week, but most people believe that it's probably not going to happen until at least later, probably maybe mid-December, or even until conference begins before we start seeing a lot of totals. So we're not going to have to look at a lot of totals and handicap a lot of them right now, so we can continue to learn the new rules changes. Offensive efficiency is
notice.
Pretty simple, obviously, and so is defensive efficiency. Offensive efficiency is the number of points a team scores per 100 possessions. Defensive efficiency is the number of points a team allows per 100 possessions. And then basically it's just given a figure. You can actually look at, and I do want to talk about NBA as well. You can look at the Hollinger report, which is very good for NBA. And then with college basketball, you can go to KenPom. I think there's a small charge for that. I don't use KenPom myself. That's KenPom.com. I know a lot of you already are familiar with that. But he also has his defensive and offensive efficiencies and pace factors. And you can punch those numbers in to come up with what might be the correct total of a basketball game. Unfortunately, sports books are privy to this information as well. So what we have to do is we have to determine where those numbers are coming from a standpoint of why is a team doing the pace that they're doing, and in what situations will they pace up, and what situations will they pace down. And that is by far the most keyest thing that you can do in handicapping totals for both college and NBA totals.
Now, is there any real quick, Greg, for what you just said is, that's pretty straightforward. Is there any variables or, situations or anything that you would say, trump that per se? You know what I mean? It's easy to come up with that basic thing, but, a lot of people say, playing certain teams, certain travel, what would you also look at to kind of fine tune what you just said?
Well, there's a number of things you can look at. Number one, rival teams tend to play closer to the vest. Teams that don't play each other very often do not. Every year, we covered this, I think, last March during Bracket Buster on another webinar. Bracket Buster games notoriously go over because, number one, these teams aren't on TV very much, and they want to strut their stuff, so to speak, and there's no natural rivalry. So you don't really get that defensive intensity. What I look at, and again, this is probably the biggest key to what I do, other than a couple of other things that I'm really not going to discuss on here, because that's a couple of small little angles that I use that I would rather keep privy to me.
100% understandable.
I don't want the books to understand everything that I understand. But I try to categorize basketball teams. You just can't say, well, this team is a high pace and this team is a low pace. You can do that, but they don't necessarily all the time play that same pace against the same teams. Plus, there is a handful, I would say probably no more than a handful, maybe 15 to 20% of teams in college basketball, Butler being one of them, by the way, that is a team that I call a play-along. these are the teams you really want to look at because they're generally going to assume the pace of the team that they're playing. Now, you keep that in mind along with the fact that Vegas and sports books are going to set their totals basically based on how many points this team scores versus how many points this team scores. If you know when a particular matchup might produce more points or might produce fewer points, then you're way ahead of the game. And that's really what it's all about. I mean, one of the other things that I do is, and this is somewhat subjective, during the course of the season, you might have a particular team, let's say North Carolina, that averages 81 points per game. However, they may have played 7 games this year, and one of those was against Citadel, and the other one was against another idiot team, and they may have scored 110 in those games. So you sort of have to throw that out,
right,
and really try to get a real number of when they're actually in some sort of competition level. So that might be adjusted down to, say, 73 or 74, whereas the sports books are still going to use that 81 number to post their totals. And that's where you can really see some value in setting over or under, depending on what type of thing you've got. The other thing I want to talk about is something that, again, we talked about a little bit. I think I did.
Greg, can you speak up just a tad?
Okay.
There we go.
The other thing I want to talk about is something that I think we talked about in the forum thread yesterday, and we talked about this last year as well, and that is when teams have the best chance to utilize their pace. And I have sort of a process that I go through, and probably about the third or fourth thing that I look at is the actual sideline. I'm not talking about the sideline of the court, but the actual line on the side. Let's say, again, that North Carolina, who generally runs a pretty high pace, is playing a low pace team. But we'll say Denver University. But they're at home and they're favored by 16 points. Well, the chances are, and again, you can't. You can only put yourself in the best situation to win more times than not. So it's not always going to be the case. But the chances are, at some point during the game, probably in the second half, and may even happen earlier, North Carolina is going to build a pretty decent lead. That is going to make Denver University come out of their crawl. So that gives us the best chance at an over if the betting line already is one, the total posted line is already one that we feel strong about toward the over. The same thing can be said with Denver. If Denver is a large favorite at home, where they usually pace way, way down, and they're a large favorite, the chances are in the second half they're going to pace down even further and milk the clock. So you want to find teams and you want to find situations where you have what I call a expected pace versus the actual pace of that team. And there are certain situations where the expected pace is going to be higher or lower. And one of those things that I utilize is a high sideline. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have a side play of North Carolina -4 and still go way over the total. But the chances are that you're going to have, at some point, a big lead by the team that's pacing the way you want them to pace, and you have a better chance to win. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and like I said, the totals is something, and you coming on to, there's a couple things I don't want to share. I don't think any sane person could say, someone taking 30 minutes out of their day to share a majority of what they use to handicap, especially when your livelihood is based off selling information, can complain. So don't worry about that one. Now, this point is one of the ones I was kind of excited. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Categorizing college basketball teams in the most important category of them all. You said most important, you're going to share it. So drum roll, go ahead.
Okay, well, I actually already covered that. We categorize teams with slow. You can even categorize them as ultra slow.
I thought we were going to get another important category.
No, that's it. Basically, the category is the play along team, and you need to know these teams because they don't really have their own personality. I mean, they're going to play the way that the teams that they're playing plays. So again, Butler is one of those teams. So I've seen Butler lined in a 111-point game, and I've seen them lined in a 150-point game because sportsbooks are catching on to Butler and what they do. They don't mind mixing it up. They also don't mind playing a slow pace. But obviously, I mean, still in some cases, you're getting a total posted that is well below what the pace of the team that they're playing, and you can find some value there. So those are the ones. What I try to do after about 5 or 6 games into the season is go back and look at each individual team, who they played and how they played them. And there are some teams that just simply are going to not get away from the pace that they set. You can't make them do it, and you can't expect them to do something that they don't do. But there are other teams that will get out of their normal pace. And like I said, Butler is one of those teams, and there's a number of other ones as well.
Before we go on to the other final point to give the coupon, I just want to jump in. One of your customers is on live with us on the webinar, and Jeff Valentine has a question. He says, being that totals are 70% of your picks, and hearing you just say the bookmakers may hold off on releasing college basketball spreads until mid-December or January, how will that affect the picks that you release to your clients? Will you be releasing less plays the first 2 months to your clients because of this? Bookmakers possibly not releasing totals as I just purchased your college basketball season. Just curious. And let me just jump in real quick. I know most books will release totals on the bigger teams, but I know on a lot of obscure teams where historically in the past they would put them all up. Since they have been getting their asses handed to them, at least until conference play. And I've heard this across the board, that once conference play starts, the books usually start getting a little bit of their money back. But leading into conference play, when there's so much cross teams playing each other, it's almost impossible for them to have accurate totals. And even the big boys like Pinnacle or Chris will either put up totals late in the day or lower their limits. So getting back to Jeff's question, Greg, since a lot of the totals will not be readily available in many of the mainstream books, what should a client expect, say, the first month to 2 months of being a client of yours for college basketball?
Okay, and that's a very, very good question. And the answer is probably about what it was last year, because we were basically in the same boat as we were last year. What I do is I handicap totals first. That gives me a number for each team. I then decide whether or not the side play or the total play is the best play. If there is no total play available, then I'm going to have some side plays. And I had quite a number of them last year and the previous year before all the books began putting up all the totals. And frankly, I've actually done better in November and December than any other 2 months, any other time other than March Madness over the last 6 years. So we're not going to have a decrease in cut plays. We are going to have more side plays. But my handicapping, the way that I do it, will handicap the total first. And at that point, we'll determine whether or not the total or the side is the best play, as I've always done.
NBA versus college basketball totals, what are the handicapping differences between the two?
Well, the difference between the two, and it's really kind of, it's less than subtle, actually, is the fact that NBA is more of a situational thing, because NBA teams play each other a lot. They play more games. They have sometimes situations where they're playing their third game in 5 nights, which, of course, creates tired legs. And tired legs, depending on the team, depending on the style of play, can create a really good under opportunity, or it can create a very good over opportunity. College basketball, you're looking at, maybe 2, sometimes 3 games per week. You don't really get into that fatigue factor, except maybe in like a weekend tournament or toward conference tournament play. And so, and also, and you're also playing a lot of teams, that you might play once in every 5 years in the first couple of months of the season. So it's a big difference. And frankly, NBA totals are much more sharper than college basketball totals because, just like us, sports books have to only monitor 30 basketball teams in the NBA, and they have to monitor this league now, 300 and something.
To me, that's not even debatable. I 100%, if not 1,000%, agree with you. And anyone who disagrees, all you have to look at is an NBA total that is 195, 201, and on an extreme case, you might see a 3 or 4 point move. Where a college basketball total, you could see a 124 go down to 119 or a 130. You're seeing 4, 5, 6 point swings in a college basketball total that's 60 to 80 plus points less. So that was a no-brainer. We got about 5 minutes left because I want to do the final couple of minutes and give everyone their coupon. And since you took 90-something% like everything in pregame of free content and sharing information, I'm going to give you a couple minutes at the end to share with the audience why they should invest with you for college basketball and give everyone the opportunity not only to get that 50% off coupon, but to contact me personally if they're looking to invest in you or any other pros for the season. So we got 3 more bullet points left. We're going to go to the first one, so a couple minutes each. Final 5 minutes of a game margin of score.
Okay, this is something I wanted to talk about because it's a situation where no matter how well you handicap a basketball game, total-wise, the final 5 minutes are probably going to determine whether you win. I would say at least 25 to 30% of the time. And I've had basketball games that were well under 35 points under the total in the last couple of minutes. It was like 35 points scored, and you lose it. There's nothing you can do about that. It's the reason why, much like handicapping anything else, you just have to put yourself in the best situation possible to win. Sometimes it's just not going to work out. The fact is, and I even talked to a college basketball coach on Twitter a couple of nights ago. I think I posted something to the effect of a 7 to 11 point lead in a college basketball game or NBA with under 3 minutes to go is generally going to produce a lot of points. Once you get to that 3 to 4 possession situation, you're just going to have a lot of fouling. You're going to have a lot of 3-point shots. If you get below 5, you have a much better chance of winning an under. And if you get over, say, 14, you have a much better chance of winning an under. So I guess the bottom line is you don't need to beat yourself up and say, well, Jesus Christ, that was a bad pick, simply because the margin score was not in your favor toward the end of the ball game. And that happens quite a bit during the season, especially if you got the under. Obviously, if you have the over, you want it to be in that 7 to 10 range. If you got the under, you don't. Simple as that.
All right, final 2. Conference versus non-conference games and cross-regional games halftime betting.
Oh, well, actually, halftime betting was its own category. But, no, I mean...
Throw me under the bus for fucking up the PowerPoint. So go ahead.
Well, I mean, again, something we've already sort of hit on before. Cross-country teams, cross-regional teams that don't play each other. Generally, we're not going to see that defensive intensity. I think in those situations, you absolutely have to look toward the over if it's available for you. If everything else checks out, that is a terrific intangible. Teams that play each other a lot, a couple of times a year, conference teams, there's just more intensity in that ball game, and there's better defensive play, and many, many times the under is going to be the play in that situation. That's about it.
So, real quick, we got 5 minutes left. Real quick, Greg has his opening day card up. He's already been handicapping the teams, just like Ken, having numbers ready, waiting for those books to put up numbers of what he's going to look at and go, I can't believe that's the number they're giving me. So take advantage of that. The coupon code is going to be Shaker50. That's taking 50% off his opening day college basketball card. Once again, Shaker50. So, Greg, this is the part, unlike other people in this industry or other sites where it's touting first, and they'll throw a little crumbs your way here and there. We like to make the touting last. Now, let's be honest, we sell picks. I'm not going to bullshit anybody. But the webinars are free, the videos are free, the audios are free, the forums are free, Spy's free. We don't charge for anything. We don't kick you off the site if you don't spend money. So my question to you, Greg, going into college basketball, which to me, all of the teams, somebody who watches lines and seeing how much they fluctuate, seeing places that have big balls like the Pinnacle and the Chris circle games or not put totals out till later. Even places like Grande not even put totals on a lot of the games until there's a few weeks into the season. It's definitely beatable. I'm sitting at home right now listening or watching, or I'm going to be watching or listening to this on archives in the next couple days. Why should I invest with Greg Shaker for college basketball? I'll let you take us out. Go ahead.
Well, the bottom line is that college basketball, if you work it, and you work it hard, and I do work it very, very hard. I told my wife, in fact, a couple of days ago that it's here, no sleep, and it's going to be that way over the next 4 months. In fact, the college basketball is so beatable that during the main part of the season, we are going to have some NBA plays, but we're not going to have many of them. Because the fact is, sports books absolutely positively cannot keep up with the number of teams that there are now playing in Division I. And if you do utilize information that's available to you, and if you do know the teams and you continue to update your database on what teams are, and I do, and I have an extensive database on all the college basketball teams, you are going to be successful. And that's the reason why that I have always been successful in college basketball. I may or may not have a good NFL season occasionally. I may or may not have I had a bad baseball season, in fact, a couple of years ago, which blew my mind. But I never have a bad college basketball season. We are going to have some pretty good volume. It's not going to be outrageously high, but I would suspect that we're going to have anywhere between, I would say, 17 to 20, 22 games per week, about 2 or 3 or 4 days, and we are going to win. Simple as that.
Well, Greg, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to share a lot of stuff that you do on a daily basis. I appreciate the time that everyone took to participate and listen. I'm going to appreciate everyone who watches or listens to this on the archives. Shaker50, 50% off his opening day card. If you're looking to invest in Greg for the college basketball season, shoot me an email personally at johnny@pregame.com. That's all, folks. People's Champ Johnny Detroit on behalf of pregame.com and Greg Shaker. That's going to do it. Greg, thank you. And from me to everyone who participated, listened, watched, whatever, best of luck.